Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bill Winterberg, and I'm founder of FPPad.com, and I'm broadcasting to you live from Atlanta, Georgia. And today's guest is a gentleman by the name of Peter Giza. He's the founder of Spitbrook Consulting. Peter, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Bill. Great to be here.
Great, Peter. Now, you have some prior experience in financial services technology as the CTO of RedBlack software, rebalancing software for financial advisors. So tell me about your experience with financial advisors and what you may be doing with and how you're continuing that experience with what you do in Spitbrook.
Sure. About 7 years ago, I entered into this space, the RIA space specifically. And unlike any other space that I've been in the technology industry, I found this to be a very close-knit space, a lot of camaraderie. I come from a background of telecommunications and other technologies where, trade shows are typically measured in tens of thousands. And one of the things I really like about this is, you go to a trade show, it's a couple of thousand, maybe 3 or 4, and yet there's a lot of camaraderie there and just a real feeling of friendship. So I really have enjoyed that over the past 7 years. I find advisors, very willing to give their opinions and input, and we have some lively discussions sometimes, but it ends up being a lot of fun with a lot of good input.
Great, Peter. Now, you mentioned trade shows, and CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, just wrapped up, and they get hundreds of thousands of people that go through that exhibit hall and,
Right.
and all the shows. But actually, the Financial Planning Association is one of those bodies that puts on trade shows and conferences, if you will. One of those that's coming up in March, I believe it's March 7th through 9th in Chicago, is the Business Solutions Conference. And I've been part of that task force. And part of my job was to get you on board with Business Solutions and try to push the envelope on topics that relate to financial advisors. So I invited you to come speak and do a new type of session for Business Solutions to address cloud security and data security. So walk me through and maybe tease viewers with some of that content that they might pick up through this new format of session and what you plan to speak about.
Sure. Looking really forward to that. I've been speaking for a long time at different venues, and I like impromptu speaking. So the TED series that you're planning on running is really exciting for me. So we're going to talk about cloud computing, how it exists today, really where it kind of grew up from. The cloud is the internet, and the internet is the cloud. But we're going to focus on security, and that's going to mostly revolve around data. But it's going to take some interesting twists. Many people today, they have embraced the cloud, and I think rightly so. It's here to stay, and I think the internet has had such a far-reaching, change effect in everybody's lives. I mean, you look at the adoption. I talk about cell phones, but the cell phones, are very much cloud integrated today. And as you can see, the war is going on between Samsung and Apple and so forth. There are so many people who are connected that way. From a wireless perspective, that it is just all-reaching. So we're going to talk about things that people might not really consider. I heard an interesting conversation between a custodian and one of their constituents asking about security and working from home. And there were some offhanded statements made, and the questions were revolved around, well, who has access to my data? And who has access to what I'm working on? Well, one of the biggest things that people fail to keep in mind in any kind of environment is social engineering. And social engineering, runs the gamut from, getting a phone call and somebody trying to penetrate your security to somebody lurking over your shoulder, to sniffing a network, a public network that you may be on. And there's many, many ways to get information and penetrate information in ways that you don't even realize. I mean, we're involved with support calls with many clients, and sometimes the clients are a bit too willing to hand over information, and they really don't realize how many hands have touched their information at the end of a given day.
Mm-hmm. So I've got one of these USB flash drives, right? And a great example of social engineering is if I were to make 100 of these and put some nefarious code on it and drop it in a parking lot in front of those high-rise buildings or those mid-rise financial advisor offices, top secret or company confidential or something, that's one of those examples that makes it really tempting for somebody who picks it up, that they might plug it into a computer that's supposed to be protected, it's part of the organization, and now that's one of those social engineering techniques that allows me as a hacker or an attacker to deploy my attack inside the organization. Is that a good example? And how, what kind of thought process does that generate as we dive into this security and social engineering topic?
Absolutely. That represents that device represents curiosity that kills a cat. Unless you have a device that you consider a honeypot or cannon fodder that you're going to load something on, and you don't care what happens at the end of the day, it's not connected to your network. Fine, load it. Check out and see what's on there, and hope that it's not kiddie porn or something else that you're going to get arrested for. At the very least, So there's a lot of things we really have to be careful of today. So there are many avenues by which people are exploited, and those are some of the things that we're going to talk about. Other things we'll talk about is trust factor and teaching our staff how to handle social engineering, because it happens every day. You may say, oh, well, how's that possible? It's possible. 75% of all break-ins are either manufactured through social engineering or an insider. And in fact, some of the greatest hacks known to the technology world start with social engineering component. Almost 100% of them. So because as human beings, we're willing to trust. There's that want and desire to trust people. So that's how social engineering works. You're being conned.
And I think it's doubly tempting for financial advisors because they really want to deliver great service for clients, and that may blind the triggers to be sensitive of these security issues. I know that I've written on FPPad a couple of times where financial advisors will be targeted by hackers who have hacked into a client's account, and then they send a distribution request that looks legitimate. It looks like it's coming from the client, but it's this man-in-the-middle attack, if you will. And the advisor's trying to do what's right and provide great service, but little do they know the person on the other end of that communication is not who they seem to be.
Absolutely. And there's a couple of things that people need to keep in mind is that if your security isn't inconvenient, then it's not secure. And another thing, to keep in mind is, and this is a real-world example. The company will go unnamed, but they're in the medical industry, and they frequently send their doctors around the world into areas that are under siege and so forth. Mm-hmm. They have to send their equipment knowing that they are going to be hacked. One of these companies decided to take the approach of not providing any security software whatsoever, so that they can basically, do the good old, deniable plausibility of, I have no idea, plausible deniability. I have no idea what's going on. I have no security message. Therefore, you can't accuse me, and I cannot be accused. Okay. So that gives you an idea. If a huge corporation, Fortune 500 company, is taking that approach, you can really see how nefarious daily life in the cloud is. And that's something we just have to live with each and every day.
Well, so for advisors that are taking the time to watch this broadcast, I want to give them at least some tools that they can add, deploy, investigate in their environment. And I want to talk specifically about two-factor authentication, using mobile devices like phones to receive that multi-factor code. So not only does an advisor and their employee have to know their username and credentials and passwords for a web login, but they're also going to receive this code via text message or SMS as that second factor of authentication. Is it a reasonable item of defense that advisors can deploy? And walk me through some of the pros and cons of something like two-factor authentication.
Well, two-factor authentication comes in many flavors. The one that you're speaking of is, what I call, it's the old-fashioned dial-back, and it's very, very effective. It's been in use for decades, and it's probably one of the most effective ways, to have two-factor authentication, because it's very difficult to do a man-in-the-middle attack. Most people don't have the facilities or the equipment to do a man-in-the-middle attack on a cell phone. I mean, it takes very sophisticated equipment to do that, plus the level of authentication that's used is becoming even more and more sophisticated. So that's a really strong way for two-factor. The other two-factor, which is very commonly used in banking interfaces to ask you several questions, because if it doesn't recognize the ID of the computer you're coming from, it'll automatically flag that. I personally, when I use the two-factor authentication with the bank, I never basically allow the bank to remember my computer. I always make it ask me for that two-factor information. So I think that's one thing, a good clue. I think another thing, a very useful tool, is have lots of extra email addresses. I know you don't like getting spam, but if you have multiple email addresses that get out there, and there are phishing attacks, when you start seeing the same email messages that look very convincing but coming across all of your email addresses, you're darn sure that those are phishing attacks. So multiple email addresses are very useful for, predetermining, garbage, especially nefarious attacks.
So you're talking about setting up decoys, essentially. And when you
Exactly.
start getting all this traffic through these decoys, it's a great, easy way to get a flag that, I usually rarely use this for legitimate communication, and now all of a sudden clients or people posing as clients and imposters are just spamming me with all these messages through these decoy accounts.
Absolutely. That, and you'll see, let's say you'll see a request for a transaction, and it comes across 3 of those email addresses, and there's no way that you'd ever see a client request through those others. I mean, that's a clear giveaway. So yeah, having multiple emails, it's a simple thing, but it can make the difference between being had and not.
So to wrap up the conversation, since we're running close on time here, I approached you with that topic of cloud security, but what we're really talking about are some of these easy, simple defenses to add that help increase security or help prevent, I think, attacks. Because what you're doing is you're increasing the bar, you're increasing the complexity of what an attacker is going to have to try to do in an attempt to break into the system. And really what we're just trying to do is be stronger and more difficult to attack than the other guy, so that the attacker may just say, look, this is not worth it. I don't want to spend the energy to hack into a phone to get this second factor authentication code. I'll just go to another user account that they don't have any two-factor authentication. Is it really a good step in approaching cloud security as more and more advisors move off their servers and move into cloud environments?
I know so. I mean, you have to take, it's like getting your flu shot. You got to build up your immune system, and attacks change from minute to minute, really. So the more we understand, none of us are going to be experts. To be an expert in security, you need to be a Kevin Mitnick, having been a hacker and now being a consultant. You really have to have lived that world. And I've been studying security for a long time, but there is no possible way that I'll ever be, considered a true expert in security. You can't do it. And so it's just like getting a flu shot. Be aware of what the symptoms are, and keep on top of those things, and just make sure that your firm understands that the threat exists. It's not something you have to be terrified of. Like somebody's going to mug you. Just be aware.
Yeah, I think those are really practical takeaways, and I anticipate advisors who do want to attend the FPA Business Solutions Conference, they're going to get a lot more of these practical solutions and get some better education. They're not, like you said, they're not going to leave the session being a complete security expert, but I believe they'll have the education and knowledge of software systems that they can put in place and how they can beef up security on their hardware, because every advisor that's watching this is entrusted with protecting sensitive information and confidential information that is entrusted to them by their clients.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you, Peter, and I thank you for accepting my invitation to present at the conference. Again, that's going to be, I believe, March 7th through 9th, 2013 in Chicago. More information can be found by Googling the FPA Business Solutions keyword. And right now I'm going to show my screen on the schedule of upcoming broadcasts that I have. Next week, I'm going to be presenting with Ethan Eden, the CEO of Market 76, which got some press recently this week in RIA Biz for releasing a free CRM for financial advisors. Following that will be Tim Welsh, founder of Nexus Strategy. I just saw him this week at the Laserfiche user conference in Anaheim, California. And then February 1st, there will be no broadcast that overlaps with the TD Ameritrade National Conference where I will be attending. So there'll be a little bit of a break there. But again, Peter, thanks for taking the time out of your schedule to address some security items for financial advisors. And thanks again. I'm looking forward to seeing you in March.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
All right, everyone, thank you for watching and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.